She was a quiet wife who clipped coupons, wore second-hand clothes, and drove a decade-old Honda Civic. He was the tech billionaire who believed he had risen far above her. So when Adrian Sterling dropped divorce papers on the table, laughing at her with his young mistress at his side, he thought he was throwing away useless baggage. He thought he was leaving behind a poor nobody. He was wrong. Very wrong. What Adrian didn't know was that the woman wiping down his counters and folding his shirts wasn't just Isabella Sterling. She was Her Royal Highness, Princess Isabella of House Valwis. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't stay a private divorce for long. It became an international scandal. And the way this man crashes, you honestly won't believe it. The sharp click of a Mont-Blanc pen hitting the marble kitchen island cracked through the silence of the penthouse like a warning shot. Sign it, Bella. Don't turn this into a circus. You know perfectly well you can't afford attorneys who can stand against Kravitz, Swain, and Moore, Adrian said, his voice soaked in that cold, polished boredom only the ultra-rich seemed to perfect. He didn't even bother looking at her. He was too busy fixing the cuff of his custom Brioni suit and admiring his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Isabella sat quietly at the kitchen island with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a faded gray cardigan Adrian had told her more than once to throw out. "Adrian," she said softly, her voice calm and steady, "our 10th anniversary is next week." A cutting laugh sliced through the room. It didn't come from Adrian. Tiffany walked in from the terrace, holding a glass of Bollinger champagne. She was 23, a former fitness influencer who had reinvented herself as a brand consultant for Adrian's tech empire, Sterling Dynamics. She wore a silk robe Isabella recognized instantly. Adrian had bought it for Isabella's birthday the year before. Isabella had never worn it. She thought it was too expensive to risk ruining. "Oh, sweetheart," Tiffany cooed, leaning into Adrian and tracing a finger along his jaw. "Anniversaries are for couples still in love, or at least for couples in the same tax bracket." Adrian smirked and pulled Tiffany closer by the waist. "She's right, Bella. Look at you. You're simple. Back in college, your poverty was charming. You were the humble girl who kept me grounded while I built my first app. But now I'm worth $4 billion. I need a partner who matches the image. Someone who can handle a red carpet, not someone who shops for detergent discounts at Walmart." Isabella lowered her eyes to the papers in front of her. The bold header glared up at her. "Petition for dissolution of marriage. The prenup is airtight," Adrian went on, tapping the document. "You get the apartment in Queens, the 2015 Honda, and $2,000 a month for 3 years. Honestly, that's generous considering you contributed absolutely nothing to Sterling Dynamics." Nothing. A flicker moved behind Isabella's eyes. She remembered sitting in their cramped dorm room correcting his code because his dyslexia made him miss syntax errors. She remembered taking double shifts at the diner so he could afford the servers that hosted his first platform. She remembered pawning her grandmother's emerald ring, the only family heirloom she had with her at the time, to help him survive an early lawsuit. "I contributed my life, Adrian," she said. "You contributed domestic labor." Tiffany cut in with an eye roll, which, by the way, is very replaceable. "We already hired a proper housekeeping staff for the Hamptons estate. They're faster, and frankly, they dress better." Adrian glanced at his Rolex Daytona. "I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. Sign the papers, Bella. Take the deal. If you fight this, I'll bury you under so many legal fees you'll end up in a shelter. You're a poor girl from nowhere. Don't act like you can go to war with a titan." Isabella rose to her feet. The movement was unhurried, elegant, and somehow unsettling. For a brief second, the timid little housewife disappeared. Her shoulders straightened. Her chin lifted. A sudden frost settled into her blue eyes, something Adrian had never seen before. "You want a divorce, Adrian?" she asked, desperately. "And you want me gone tonight with nothing but what I'm wearing?" He gave a lazy shrug. "Take whatever fits in your Honda." Isabella picked up the pen. She didn't pause. She signed with a graceful flourish far too refined for the woman Adrian thought she was. Isabella A. not Sterling. Just A. Done, she said, sliding the papers back to him. Adrian snatched them with a smug chuckle. Good girl. Now get out. Tiffany wants the master bedroom redone before the gala tonight. Isabella walked toward the door. She didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't reach for the Honda keys hanging by the wall. She opened a heavy oak door, then turned once before leaving. You're right about one thing, Adrian, she said, her voice clear and composed. I have been pretending for a long time, and it was exhausting lowering myself to your level. Adrian barked out a laugh. My level? I'm on top of the world, sweetheart. Isabella gave him one last look. Enjoy the view, she said. The fall is long. Then she stepped out and shut the door behind her. Outside the building on Fifth Avenue, the cold October wind hit her face. The elderly doorman, Henry, who had always treated her kindly, tipped his hat and frowned at the sight of her without a coat. Taxi, Mrs. Sterling? No, thank you, Henry, Isabella said gently. And please, don't call me Mrs. Sterling anymore. Isabella is fine. She walked 2 blocks south, away from the photographers who constantly lingered outside Adrian's building. Then she stopped beside a plain black sedan parked near St. Patrick's Cathedral. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was an armored Mercedes-Maybach S680 Guard, the kind favored by presidents and royal families. The rear window lowered an inch. Isabella tapped the glass 3 times. The door opened immediately. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out. He was broad-shouldered, heavily built, with a scar down his left cheek. This was Kalen, her personal protection officer, a man Adrian had never once met, because for 10 years he'd been ordered to stay invisible. Your Highness, Kalen said, bowing his head. He did not care who saw. We received the signal. Take me to the Pierre, Isabella said, slipping into the leather interior scented faintly with lavender and old wealth. Then she added, and Kalen, call my grandmother. Kalen's eyes flicked to the mirror. The Queen Mother, ma'am. She's been waiting for this call for 10 years, Isabella said quietly, leaning back against the seat. I know, Isabella murmured. Tell her the experiment is over. The American commoner failed the test. They drove in silence to the Pierre, one of Manhattan's oldest grand hotels. By the time the car reached the curb, the general manager was already waiting outside, having been alerted through a secure diplomatic channel only minutes earlier. Your Highness, he whispered as he opened her door. The royal suite is ready. Staff have all been briefed on strict confidentiality. No one knows you're here. Thank you, Charles. Inside the suite, which cost more per night than Adrian's entire monthly alimony offer, Isabella walked directly to the mirror. She removed the cheap cardigan, then the plain cotton blouse. Kalen had already stocked the suite's private safe with her real possessions, all kept in secure New York storage for emergencies. She opened it and took out a sapphire ring. It wasn't just a ring. It was a star of Alwys, a 12-carat stone passed down through generations. She slid it onto her finger, replacing the thin gold wedding band Adrian had once bought without thought. Then she picked up the phone. Connect me to Tobias Thorne. Tobias Thorne wasn't merely a lawyer. He was the kind of legal predator other billionaires prayed never to face. He ran Thorne Winstrop and Gables, a firm so powerful it didn't need advertising because its clients were monarchies, governments, and sovereign funds. Isabella, Tobias said when he came on the line, his voice smooth and rich. Is it time? He served the papers, she said, staring out the skyline. He thinks he's giving me $2,000 a month. Tobias laughed, deeply, darkly. Oh, this will be entertaining. Do you want full scorched earth protocol, or shall we let him play first? I'm attending the charity gala tonight, Isabella said. The one Sterling Dynamics is sponsoring. The one he's taking his mistress to. You don't have an invitation. I don't need one. Tobias, I own the venue. That evening, the Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with light and money. Cameras flashed in blinding bursts as Adrian Sterling stepped from his Lamborghini, looking every inch the untouchable tech king. Tiffany clung to his arm in a sheer red gown designed for maximum attention. "Smile, babe," Adrian murmured. "The stock will jump 10 points when they see us together. We're the power couple of the new era." Tiffany giggled. "What about your ex? Is she crying in her Honda right now?" Adrian scoffed. "Who cares? She's history." They climbed the museum steps while reporters shouted their names. Adrian basked in the admiration, shaking hands with senators, movie stars, and hedge fund royalty. He felt invincible. Then the music stopped, not gradually. Abruptly, the orchestra cut off in the middle of a phrase. A hush spread across the grand hall. The lights dimmed until only a single spotlight remained, shining down on the top of the sweeping staircase. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice unsteady, "please rise to the patron of tonight's event." Adrian frowned. "Patron? I'm the sponsor. I didn't approve a patron." The announcer continued. "Distinguished guests, Her Royal Highness Princess Isabella of the House of Valois, Duchess of Monair." The doors above opened. Adrian Sterling forgot how to breathe. Isabella descended the grand staircase of the Met. But she was no longer the woman who hesitated outside luxury boutiques because she feared being judged. She floated down those steps like she had been born above them. She wore a midnight blue velvet gown custom-made to her body, trailing behind her like a royal shadow. The off-the-shoulder neckline revealed luminous skin beneath the museum lights. But it wasn't the gown that made Manhattan's elite gasp. It was the jewels. At her throat rested the Valois choker. 3 rows of raw diamonds centered by a sapphire the size of a small egg. On her head sat a delicate diamond tiara that caught the light and hurled it back in dazzling shards. Adrian stared with his mouth slightly open, his mind struggling to make 2 impossible images fit together. "That's Bella," his brain insisted. "That's the woman who uses coupons for laundry detergent." But the woman on the staircase looked down at the room with calm, royal detachment that could never have been faked. It was the face of someone raised to command nations. "What is she doing?" Tiffany hissed, digging her nails into his arm. "Why is she wearing a crown? Is she part of the entertainment? A mascot?" Adrian shook her off and stumbled toward the foot of the stairs. "Bella!" he shouted, too loudly for the silence of the room. Isabella did not even blink. She reached the bottom step, where the museum director and the mayor of New York were waiting. Both men bowed, actually bowed. "Your Highness," the mayor said, visibly humbled, "we are honored that you chose New York for your return to public life. The House of Valois has always been a treasured friend to the city." "Thank you, Mayor Higgins," Isabella replied. Her voice had changed. The soft, mousy tone was gone. In its place was a crisp transatlantic accent, polished, controlled, and impossible to ignore. "My grandmother sends her regards from the palace." Adrian pushed forward, face flushing. This had to be fake. It had to be some absurd stunt. Maybe she'd blown all their savings on a costume designer just to humiliate him. "Bella!" he barked, reaching for her arm. "What the hell is this? Take that ridiculous thing off your head. You're making a scene." Before his fingertips could brush her sleeve, a hand like steel locked around his wrist. Adrian yelped as his arm was twisted behind his back with surgical precision. He dropped to his knees. "Let him go, Kalen," Isabella said mildly. Kalen released him with a shove that sent the billionaire sprawling across the polished floor. Adrian scrambled up, humiliated and furious. "You assaulted me," he screamed at Kalen. "I'll have you arrested." Then he turned to Isabella, wild-eyed. "And you're insane. Princess, you're a waitress from Ohio. Tell them, Bella. Tell them how I found you serving coffee." The room went dead silent. Cameras kept rolling. Every angle of Adrian's unraveling was being captured in real time. At last Isabella turned to him. She studied him not with rage, but with a detached curiosity one might give a bug on glass. "Ohio," she repeated with a faint, amused smile. "I believe I told you I was staying in Ohio when we met. I never said I was from there. It was part of my gap year, a study in how the other half lives." "The other half?" Adrian sputtered. I'm worth $4 billion. New money, Isabella said coolly, and temporary. Tiffany stepped forward, sensing the cameras and trying to reclaim the moment. Listen, lady, I don't know what weird game you're playing, but Adrian is the guest of honor tonight. He paid for this gala, so unless you want security to throw you out, maybe you should leave. Isabella laughed. It was a soft, musical sound that somehow made the room colder. She looked toward the museum director. Mr. Henderson, she said, who owns the deed to this wing? The director cleared his throat nervously. The Valwis Foundation, Your Highness. Your family donated the land and building in 1954. Isabella nodded once. And who technically sponsored tonight's gala? The director shifted awkwardly and glanced at Adrian. Mr. Sterling pledged a donation of $5 million. Pledged, Isabella repeated. Then she turned back to Tiffany. My family owns the floor you're standing on. I own the paintings on the walls. And regarding that donation, I don't believe Sterling Dynamics is in a position to be donating money right now. Do you, Adrian? Adrian sneered. My company is posting record profits. I can buy and sell your entire fake family. Can you? She signaled to Kalen. He drew a sleek black tablet from his jacket and handed it to her. I suggest you check your phone, Adrian, she said. Asian markets have just opened, and news of our divorce, or more accurately, the nature of it, has already hit the wire. Adrian fumbled for his phone. 40 missed calls from his CFO. He opened his trading app. Sterling Dynamics was down 35%. The chart wasn't a dip. It was a cliff. What did you do? He whispered, the blood draining from his face. I didn't do anything, Isabella said almost innocently. I merely withdrew my support. She stepped closer. You see, Adrian, when we married, I didn't only sign a marriage certificate. My family's sovereign wealth fund, the Valwis Trust, quietly guaranteed your original business loans. We were the silent anchor that made banks comfortable lending to a dyslexic college dropout with a prototype and a dream. The crowd murmured as phones rose higher. You called me a poor nobody this morning, Isabella said. You said I contributed nothing. But the truth is, Adrian, I was the reason you were ever allowed in the room. The banks didn't bet on your code. They bet on my dowry. A ripple spread through the hall. Live streams exploded. And now that we're divorcing, she continued, her voice hardening, the Valwis Trust has withdrawn its guarantees. The banks are recalling your loans. All of them. Tonight. You can't do that, Adrian croaked. That's illegal. That's market manipulation. It's banking, she corrected. If you had ever read the loan agreements instead of cheating on me, you'd know there's a change of circumstances clause. You divorced your collateral. Then she turned away from him. Kalen, have Mr. Sterling and his associate removed. They are trespassing on private property. Tiffany shrieked. You can't throw me out. I'm a VIP. Kalen did not speak. He simply stepped forward, and 2 NYPD officers working event security moved into place behind him. They no longer looked at Adrian with admiration. Now they looked at him like an inconvenience. Sir, ma'am, please come with us, one officer said, as Adrian was escorted toward the exit. Stumbling and pale, he twisted to look back. Isabella was now surrounded by the mayor, a senator, and a duke. She was laughing at something the duke said while holding a glass of champagne. She looked radiant. She looked untouchable. She looked like a woman he had never known at all. By the next morning, Manhattan was consumed by only one story. The billionaire and the princess. From coupons to crowns. Sterling Dynamics crashes after royal ties severed. Adrian Sterling had not slept. He sat in the conference room on the 40th floor of his headquarters. The mahogany table gleamed. The Italian leather chairs were immaculate. The mood in the room felt like a funeral. His board of directors sat around him in grim silence. Usually these people nodded through everything Adrian said. Today no one would meet his eyes. It's catastrophic, Adrian, Marcus, the CFO, said, mopping sweat from his head. The stock is down 60% since last night. The banks froze our credit lines. Vendors want cash in advance. We're bleeding. It's a bluff, Adrian snapped, slamming his hand on the table. She's bluffing. She's just a girl I lived with for 10 years. She doesn't have this kind of power. It's a PR stunt. Marcus stared at him like he'd lost his mind and slid a file across the table. A PR stunt? Adrian, have you ever Googled House of Valwis? No. Why would I? Marcus inhaled shakily. Because they're one of the oldest royal families in Europe. They may not rule politically anymore, but financially, they're dynastic. Shipping, pharmaceuticals, private equity, tech. Their wealth is estimated in the trillions, Adrian. Not billions. Trillions. Adrian felt his stomach turn. He reached for a bottle of water, but his hand shook. So what? He said, forcing bravado back into his voice. We have the technology. We have the users. They can't take the company from me. I still own 51% of the voting shares. The conference room doors swung open. Actually, said a smooth baritone, that point is now debatable. Tobias Thorne entered carrying a slim leather briefcase, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most cars. Behind him came Isabella. No gown today. No tiara. She wore a sharply cut white power suit, her hair pulled back in an elegant, severe bun. She looked less like a princess and more like the woman who owned the room before she stepped into it. Who let them in? Adrian shouted. Security! Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Tobias said calmly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Adrian's knees buckled anyway, and he sank back into his chair. Tobias placed one document on the table. This, he said, is the original incorporation filing for Sterling Dynamics. Do you recognize it? I wrote it, Adrian spat. You signed it, Tobias corrected. But the initial capital, the $2 million that purchased your first servers and paid your original engineering hires, came from a shell company named Blue Heron Ventures. Correct. Adrian frowned. Yeah, my angel investor. Anonymous. Blue Heron Ventures, Isabella said as she took the seat at the head of the table, the chair normally reserved for the chairman, is a subsidiary of the Valwis Trust. I approve that transfer personally. I was 21. Adrian gave a bitter laugh. So I owe you $2 million? Fine. I'll write the check right now. Get out of my company. Read Section 8, Paragraph C, Tobias said. Adrian squinted down at the page. In the event of default on the morality clause, or dissolution of the primary relationship between founder and beneficiary, all Class A voting shares revert to the investor until principal is repaid with 15% retroactive compound interest. Morality clause, Adrian whispered. Adultery violates the morality clause, Tobias said with thin smile, and the divorce filing you served yesterday constitutes dissolution of the relationship. Which means, Isabella said, folding her hands on the table, as of this morning, Blue Heron Ventures, and by extension me, has converted the debt into equity. I am now the majority shareholder of Sterling Dynamics. The room gasped. Board members looked from Adrian to Isabella, silently calculating which side their stock option preferred. You can't do this. Adrian screamed. I built this company. I am Sterling Dynamics. No, Isabella said coldly. You are now its largest liability. Marcus, what is the current projection if Adrian remains CEO? Marcus looked at Adrian, then down at his papers. Bankruptcy in 3 weeks, Your Highness. And if he is removed, then I assume interim chairmanship with Valwis liquidity behind the company? Marcus swallowed. The market would likely rebound to a historic high by close. Something shifted in the room. It was palpable. The board turned on Adrian one by one. I move for a vote of no confidence in Adrian Sterling, said Sarah, a board director who had once mentored him. Seconded. Marcus said immediately, all in favor? Isabella asked. Every hand rose, except Adrian's. You're firing me, he whispered, from my own company. We are accepting your resignation, Isabella corrected. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Kalen stepped into the room. He didn't look like a bodyguard today. He looked like final judgment. No. Adrian grabbed the edge of the table. I'm not leaving. I have rights. The prenup. The prenup says. The prenup protected premarital assets. Tobias cut in. Since this company was founded after your marriage, and since the seed funding came from her trust, it is marital property governed by the very contract you neglected to understand. You should have hired a better lawyer, Adrian. LegalZoom is not enough for arrangements involving royalty. Adrian looked toward the doorway. Tiffany was standing there clutching her designer handbag, watching his collapse unfold in real time. Tiff, he pleaded, call the press. Tell them they're stealing my company. Tiffany looked at him, sweating, desperate, disgraced. Then she looked at Isabella, calm, powerful, and impossibly wealthy. Tiffany slowly took out her phone. Actually, she said, voice icy, I think I'm going to call an Uber. This is getting embarrassing. Tiffany. But she was already turning away. Mr. Sterling, Kalen said, placing a heavy hand on Adrian's shoulder. It's time. Adrian was dragged from the room, heels skidding over the carpet. As he passed the glass walls, hundreds of employees watched, not with pity, with curiosity, and more than a few with relief. They weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at their new boss, the princess who was already issuing restructuring directives to the CFO. As the elevator doors shut on Adrian's furious face, Isabella never once looked up. Now, she said to the stunned boardroom, let's discuss the restructuring. First, cut the executive entertainment budget, especially the helicopter line item for Hampton's weekends. We're pivoting to philanthropy. The board nodded so quickly it bordered on panic. Isabella crossed to the window and looked out over the city. Far below, she could just make out Adrian being pushed from the building by security and straight into a swarm of paparazzi. Her phone buzzed. A text from her grandmother. I saw the news. The stock is up. Well done, darling. But don't stop yet. The mistress still needs her lesson. Isabella smiled faintly. The business side was finished. The personal side had only just begun. 3 days after the boardroom bloodbath, Tiffany sat in the waiting area of Vogue Management, the most exclusive talent agency in New York. She checked her reflection in her phone camera. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were darting. Her notifications had been exploding, but not the way she liked. In 72 hours, she had lost 400,000 followers. Her comment section, once packed with fire emojis and goals, had turned into a wasteland of crown emojis and Team Isabella hashtags. Tiffany. She looked up. A tall, severe woman in glasses stood in the doorway. Janice Miller, head booker. Tiffany rose and flashed her brightest trained smile. Janice, so good to see you. I know I don't have an appointment, but with everything happening, I thought we should strategize. My engagement is trending. You're not engaged, Tiffany, Janice said flatly. Adrian Sterling is bankrupt. Come in. We need to talk. Tiffany's smile cracked. He's having temporary liquidity issues. He's suing to recover the company. But that's not the point. I'm the brand. I can pivot. I was thinking maybe a reality show. The Real X of Wall Street. Janice sighed in a way that sounded like a woman grieving her own time. Come in. Tiffany followed her into the office. Everything was sharp white and meticulously curated. Behind Janice's desk hung a massive frame display of the agency's most iconic campaigns. Tiffany froze. In the center was a vintage black and white fashion photograph from the 1950s. An astonishingly beautiful woman in Dior stood on a Paris balcony. That's, Tiffany squinted. That, Janice said, sitting down, is Princess Genevieve of Valwis, Isabella's grandmother. Tiffany felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why is that on your wall? Because the Valwis Trust owns Vogue Management. They acquired us 6 years ago. We're part of their media arm. Tiffany dropped into the chair. She told you to fire me. No, Janice said, opening a file. Princess Isabella hasn't needed to call. Tiffany, you're radioactive. I spent all morning fielding calls from L'Oreal Revolve and Gucci. Every single one is cutting ties. They can't do that. I have contracts. Read the morality clauses, Janice said, sliding the papers across the desk. Being the other woman in a high-profile divorce involving royalty is not edgy. It's tacky. Luxury fashion does not do tacky. It does mystique. Isabella has mystique. You have notoriety. Janice stood. We are terminating your contract effective immediately. You'll be blacklisted by every serious agency in this city. I suggest Los Angeles. Or maybe Florida. I'm not leaving New York. Tiffany shouted, springing to her feet. I'm a star. No, Janice said. You're a meme. Security will show you out. Across the river, the setting was much less glamorous. Adrian Sterling sat on a thin mattress in a cramped studio apartment in Queens. Ironically, it was the exact apartment he had once offered Isabella in the divorce settlement, believing himself generous. The water pressure was terrible. The radiator clanged at odd hours. The neighbors blasted reggaeton until 3 a.m. He stared at his laptop. His corporate accounts were gone. His company email had been locked. His credit cards were being declined. The only cash he had was what he managed to pull before the freeze, and it was disappearing fast. He grabbed his phone and called the only attorney still willing to answer him. Barry, Adrian barked. Tell me you found something. Barry Glimmer was no Tobias Thorne. Barry was a strip mall lawyer whose face smiled from billboards beside the slogan hurt. Call Glimmer. I'm reviewing the paperwork, Adrian. Barry said in a raspy voice. It's tight. Thorne is a monster. But maybe we found a crack. Adrian sat upright. What is it? The prenup? No. Fraud. We sue for fraudulent inducement into marriage. Claim she misrepresented her financial status to trap you. If you had known she was royalty with billions behind her, you never would have signed the business documents that gave her leverage. We argue the power dynamic was concealed. Adrian began pacing the tiny room. Yes, exactly. She tricked me. She pretended to be poor. It's a stretch, Barry warned. But with the right jury in New York, if we play the manipulated American entrepreneur versus foreign monarchy angle, maybe we shake a settlement loose. We ask for half. Half! Adrian laughed, nearly manic. Half the Valois fortune? Barry lowered his voice. That's the idea. Get a suit that fits, Adrian. Tomorrow we go to war. The New York Supreme Court turned into a media zoo. Sterling versus Sterling had become the trial the whole world was watching. It wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was class warfare turned upside down. Crowds packed the sidewalks. Some held signs supporting Adrian, claiming American innovation was under attack by foreign aristocracy. Most of them, however, were there for Isabella, Queen of Queens. Inside courtroom 4B, the air felt heavy enough to choke on. Adrian sat at the plaintiff's table. He had shaved, but he looked gaunt. His department store suit hung awkwardly from his frame. Beside him, Barry Glimmer sweated in cheap polyester while organizing piles of papers that looked barely controlled. At the defense table, everything was calm. Isabella sat straight-backed in a navy Chanel suit. She wore no jewelry except her simple wedding band, which she had not yet removed. A calculated choice. Next to her, Tobias Thorne looked less like a lawyer than a predator waiting for wounded prey to collapse. All rise. The bailiff boomed. Judge Elena Vance entered. Known as the Iron Gavel, she despised media spectacle and had even less patience for fools. Be seated, Judge Vance said, adjusting her glasses. I have reviewed the briefs. Mr. Glimmer, you are alleging strategic identity fraud? Yes, Your Honor. Barry stood and buttoned his jacket. My client married a woman he believed to be Isabella Anderson, a struggling student from Ohio. He supported her. He built a company to provide for their future. Had he known she was in fact a royal woman with access to limitless capital, He never would have entered financial agreements that ultimately stripped him of his business. She concealed her wealth to gain leverage. Barry wiped his forehead. She played the long game. Your Honor. She waited until he was successful, then stole his life's work. A murmur moved through the gallery. It was ridiculous, but in an ugly, twisted way, it almost sounded plausible. Mr. Thorne? Judge Vance said. Tobias rose. He did not carry notes. Your Honor, he said, his voice filling the room. Mr. Sterling is not the victim of fraud. He is the victim of his own ego. He stepped into the center of the courtroom. We will show that Mr. Sterling knew enough to ask questions. He simply never cared to ask because the truth did not support a preferred narrative, namely, that he was a savior. Further, choosing not to disclose a royal title in the United States is not fraud. It is privacy. In my client's case, it was also security. Adrian scoffed loudly. Mr. Sterling. The judge snapped. Silence. Tobias turned. The defense calls a plaintiff. Adrian walked to the stand feeling strangely confident. He had built his fortune as a salesman as much as a coder. He could sell a story. Mr. Sterling, Tobias began, leaning lightly against the rail. You claim my client contributed nothing to your success. She didn't. Adrian said smoothly. She cooked. She cleaned. She handled domestic stuff. I wrote the code. I closed the deals. And the initial funding? The $2 million. I believe it came from an angel investor. You believed, Tobias repeated, because you never asked. Isn't that true? A shell company registered in Luxembourg sends you $2 million, and you perform no meaningful due diligence. You do not ask your wife, who suddenly has access to that contact. I was busy building. The product, Adrian said, stumbling slightly. Let's discuss the domestic labor you dismissed, Tobias said, beginning to pace. In 2018, Sterling Dynamics faced a hostile takeover from Omnicorp. You were awake all night panicking. True. Yes. And the next morning, Omnicorp abruptly withdrew the bid and apologized. Adrian managed a proud smile. I guess my strategy scared them off. Tobias smiled back. It was not a warm smile. Actually, Mr. Sterling, they withdrew because Isabella made one phone call. He held up a record. At 3:02 a.m., Isabella called her uncle. Do you know who her uncle is? Adrian shook his head. Prince Henry of Valois. He sits on Omnicorp's board. She informed him that if the hostile takeover proceeded, the Valois Trust will remove $40 billion in assets from Omnicorp's European operations. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The bid disappeared 5 minutes later, Tobias said. She saved your company with one call while you were crying in the bathroom, and you call her useless? Adrian's face burned purple. I didn't ask her to do that. I didn't know. You didn't know, Tobias thundered, slamming a hand on the railing, because you never truly looked at her. You only ever looked into a mirror. He returned to counsel table and lifted a thick file. But that is not the only issue before this court. Your Honor, we are countersuing. Barry squeaked. Countersuing? For embezzlement, Tobias said. Adrian froze. During discovery, Tobias continued, handing documents to the judge, we audited Sterling Dynamics. We located a stream of payments marked R&D consultancy routed to a Cayman Islands firm. $500,000 per month. For 3 years. The firm is named Tipco Holdings. Every head in the room turned toward Adrian. You were funneling corporate funds, shareholder funds, to your mistress. Tobias said, that is not merely a breach of contract. It is a federal offense. It is grand larceny. And because Blue Heron Ventures, and thus Isabella, was majority shareholder, you were stealing from your own wife. It was legitimate consulting, Adrian stammered, sweating. Branding. She consulted on branding. We have emails, Tobias said softly. Emails in which you told Tiffany, quote, don't worry about the price. I'll bury it in the R&D budget. The board never checks there. The silence in the courtroom became absolute. Judge Vance read through the documents, her face hardening. "Mr. Glimmer," she said at last, "do you have a defense of this?" Barry looked at the pages, then at Adrian. Then he started packing his briefcase. "Your Honor," Barry said weakly, "I would like to request a recess to discuss a possible plea arrangement with the district attorney." "No." Adrian grabbed his arm. "No plea. Fight them." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Vance said, striking the bench. "The court is in recess for 30 minutes. And Mr. Sterling, I am remanding you into custody pending further proceedings. You are now a flight risk." 2 officers moved toward him. Isabella rose and walked to the rail as Adrian was being cuffed. His eyes were wild. "You planned this," he hissed. "You set me up." Isabella leaned in just enough for only him to hear. She smelled like roses and victory. "I didn't plan for you to become a thief, Adrian," she whispered. "I just turned on the lights. Whatever you did in the dark was always yours." Then she turned and walked away as a heavy door swung shut behind her, leaving him with the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. 6 months later, the waiting room at Otisville Correctional Facility looked nothing like a Manhattan penthouse. The walls were institutional beige. The air smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Plastic chairs were bolted to the floor. Adrian Sterling sat in one of them wearing an oversized prison jumpsuit. His hair, once styled by a celebrity barber on Madison Avenue, had been buzzed short. He looked older now. The arrogance that had defined his face for a decade had worn away, replaced by bitterness and confusion. "Visitor for inmate 8940. A guard grunted. Adrian rose, pulse racing. He expected Barry Glimmer, who was still trying to appeal his 5-year sentence for wire fraud and embezzlement. But when the steel door buzzed open, it wasn't Barry. It was Isabella. She sat down behind the plexiglass partition. She wore a simple trench coat, yet even under fluorescent prison lighting she looked unreal, like someone from another world entirely. She lifted the black phone on her side of the glass. Adrian stared for a long moment before lifting his own. "You came to gloat?" he asked, voice cracked and rough from disuse. "I came to bring you this," Isabella said calmly. She held a single document to the glass. It was her final divorce decree. "It's official. As of this morning, we are strangers." Adrian looked down at it, then back at her face. "You took everything, Bella. The company, the house, my reputation. You left me with nothing." "I left you with exactly what you began with," she said gently. "Actually, more than that. I paid off your personal credit card debt before the seizures were finalized. You'll leave prison with a clean slate. That's more mercy than you earned." Adrian gripped the receiver tighter. "Why didn't you just tell me? If I had known you were a princess, if I had known what kind of power you had, things would have been different." For the first time, Isabella's expression softened. But it wasn't pity. It was a sadness of finally having an answer. "I know," she said. "If you had known, you would have treated me like a prize, not a person. You would have loved the title, not the woman. I wanted to be loved for me, Adrian, for the girl who made your coffee and listened to your dreams. And for a little while, maybe you did, but then you got rich, and suddenly she wasn't enough. I was under pressure," Adrian pleaded. "The company, the stress. Tiffany was just an escape. It meant nothing." "It meant everything," Isabella said. "It revealed your character. Money didn't change you. It magnified you." She stood. The movement was final. "Wait," Adrian said, panic flaring. "What about the company? Sterling Dynamics. What did you do with it?" A small smile touched her mouth. "Oh, I rebranded it. It's Valwis Tech now. We shut down that invasive data mining software you loved so much. We build educational platforms for underserved schools. It's performing beautifully. The stock is up 200%. Adrian sank slowly back into his chair. The company he had built to exploit people had become a philanthropic engine carrying her legacy. The irony hit like weight on his chest. Goodbye, Adrian, Isabella said. She hung up the phone. She did not look back as she walked away. She passed through the security checkpoints, out the prison gates, and into the cool upstate air where a black SUV was waiting. Kalen held the rear door open. To the airport, Your Highness? He asked. Yes, Isabella said, sliding in. Grandmere is waiting for tea in Paris. At the Great Lakes Mall food court, teenagers screamed, babies cried, and the smell of grease hung in the air. Tiffany adjusted her visor. Her crooked name tag read Tiff. Trainee. Hey, I ordered this pretzel with no salt, a customer yelled, slamming the tray onto the counter. Tiffany flinched. I'm sorry, sir. I can scrape it off. Scrape it off? Make another one. She sighed and reached for the tongs. She looked tired now. Her lip filler had faded months ago, and she couldn't afford another appointment. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, the expensive extensions long gone. She stole a glance at the phone hidden beneath the register. Instagram. She had made a new private account with 12 followers, most of them family members who pitted her. She tapped the Explore page. The top post was a Vanity Fair video. Her Royal Highness Princess Isabella dazzles at the Paris Opera Gala while unveiling the new Valwis Foundation Scholarship Program. Sources say she was also seen dancing with a cousin of the Duke of Cambridge. Is a royal romance coming? In the video, Isabella was laughing in silver silk, freer and happier than Tiffany had ever seen her. Tiffany stared. One tear slipped through the powder on her cheek. Hey, pretzel girl, I'm waiting, the customer shouted. Tiffany locked the screen. Coming, she muttered. Then she turned back to the oven. No billionaire was coming to rescue her. No cameras cared anymore. There was only the heat, the salt, and the long, humiliating grind of rebuilding a life from nothing. On a balcony at the Hotel de Crillon, Isabella stood with a cup of tea and the Eiffel Tower glowing beyond her. New York already felt like another lifetime. The divorce was over. The wounds were closing. Your Highness. She turned. Tobias Thorne had flown in personally with the final transfer documents for the last of Adrian's seized assets. The paperwork is complete, Tobias said, setting a folder on the table. You are formally free of all ties to Mr. Sterling. And Val Wistek has just secured a contract with the French Ministry of Education. Thank you, Tobias, she said with a smile. You've been extraordinary. I simply enjoy watching justice done, Tobias said with a grin. So what now? You have the title, the company, the fortune. What does Princess Isabella do next? Isabella looked out across the city lights. For 10 years, she had made herself smaller to fit inside someone else's world. She had dimmed herself so a weak man could feel bright. She lifted her tea and took a slow sip. I think, she said, her blue eyes sparkling with something dangerous and alive, I might buy a sports team, or a vineyard, or maybe I'll just be happy. Tobias raised his glass. To happiness. To truth, Isabella corrected, touching her cup to his glass, and to never pretending to be poor again. She turned back toward the view, the star of Valwis sapphire catching the moonlight, so brightly it seemed to outshine the Eiffel Tower itself. The Queen had returned to her throne. And that is the story of how Adrian Sterling learned the hard way that you should never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns a library. He wanted a trophy wife and threw away a queen. It's a harsh lesson, but it's real. Adrian fell in love with the image of success, while Isabella was the one quietly building it all along. In the end, he lost his wealth, his company, and even his freedom because he failed to value the person standing right in front of him. Now I have to ask you, if you were Isabella, would you have helped him one last time, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you enjoyed the story of royal revenge and instant karma, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next one. We've got another wild cheating revenge story coming next week involving a lottery ticket and a betrayed husband, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, Be careful who you step on while climbing up, because you may run into them again on the way back down.